talents, and invest wisely, we can turn the tables together with a global mind and a local hand. Welcome to the Climate Adaptation Summit. Here's your host, Sacha de Boer.
Welcome to the Climate Adaptation Summit 2021, the conference that shines light on adaptation action needed for a climate-resilient future. My name is Sacha de Boer, and I'm more than honored to present an event of such global importance. The coming 24 hours are only possible because of the innumerable hours of international cooperation, scientific research, and high-level debate, the relentless effort of our partners and participants from all over the world. In this high-level opening session, hosted by Prime Minister Mark Rutte of the Netherlands, joined by Mr. Ban Ki-moon, co-chair of the Global Commission on Adaptation, and Minister Cora van Nieuwenhuizen of Infrastructure and Water Management. An exciting selection of world leaders will share their initiatives to accelerate adaptation action. And we will also hear from other important stakeholders, ranging from international organizations, civil society, cities, to the private sector, and science, and of course, we must not forget youth. And let me briefly introduce myself. I'm a photographer with a focus on climate change and the impact it has on people all over the world, like the North Pole. The Inuit I've met there told me about Sila, that's their spirit, that stands for wisdom, the planet, all living creatures, and the weather. And they told me that Sila is confused. Everything is different now from how it was before. And that is what climate change is all about. Climate change is one of the biggest challenges humankind is facing. A task so big, it can be daunting. But the sense of urgency, the recognized opportunity, and the will to act is present here today. Thank you beforehand for sharing your actions and showing leadership. Adaptation is essential. It can and will be done. Well, Prime Minister, welcome, and thank you for hosting this very important summit. Could I start by asking you why this summit is so important for the world and for the Netherlands?
Well, thank you also for presenting this session. And to all participants and viewers around the world, welcome to the first Global Leaders Summit focused solely on climate adaptation. And why this summit? I think it is because climate change, of course, is happening now as we speak. Its social and economic consequences are already affecting the lives of hundreds of millions of people. And as we confront COVID-19 all around the world, we still need to take next action on climate change. Because if we don't adapt, the consequences will be disastrous. We could see a sharp fall in agricultural yields around the world. We could see a sharp increase in the number of people who don't have enough water. Rising seas and bigger storm surges could force hundreds of millions of people in coastal cities from their homes. And if we fail to act, climate change could push more than 100 million people in developing countries below the poverty line by 2030. But also for the Netherlands, for us here too, climate adaptation is a matter of pure survival. A large part of my country lies below sea level, as you know. The Netherlands is a small, densely populated and resourceful country. So we are very ambitious. But we are reaching, at the same time, the limits of what climate, nature, but also the environment can cope with. So business as usual is no longer an option for my country and for many others in the same situation. So we like to share our expertise and to learn from all the others. And that's why I'm so delighted and so excited that so many of you have joined us here today.
Yeah, it's very important to be here today, everybody together. But what kind of big decisions and actions do we need to take?
Well, first of all, let me stress, today is about action. We are bringing together leaders from across the world, from government, from business, from cities, academia, NGOs, as well as other partners. And we have an outstanding opportunity today to discuss how we can recover better, how we can recover stronger and recover together from this crisis. The Global Commission on Adaptation's flagship report, Adapt now showed how investing in climate adaptation can deliver many positive returns. Returns in terms of climate safety, resilience, innovation, economic growth, and of course the protection of ecosystems. An investment of $1.8 trillion to scale up climate adaptation over a decade could deliver $7.1 trillion in net benefits. So climate adaptation is the right thing to do. And it's the smart thing to do. So it's good value for money, which is why it makes sense to put adaptation at the heart of the COVID-19 response, as economic recovery will be, I believe, more resilient and more effective with climate adaptation built in. During the summit, public and private sector partners from all over the world will present solutions, actions, and best practices on resilient infrastructure, on delta development, on food security, on resilient cities and disaster risk management. And there will be a special focus on the leadership of youth and the adaptive capacity of the African continent. On that issue, I'd like to point out that the Netherlands is ensuring that its development aid is equally focused, so 50-50 on mitigation and adaptation. In 2019, we launched the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development, which is using over 160 million euros in public funding to mobilize private investment worth €500 million. It even has a target of 65% for climate adaptation finance. And that's just one example of concrete action and decisions that can help move climate adaptation forward. And I hope that more and more countries will raise their climate financing for adaptation to match their financing for mitigation.
And what are you hoping for going into this summit?
Well, of course, I hope that it will set the world on a path towards action to accelerate adaptation and resilience worldwide. So over the next 24 hours, initiatives from over 50 international partners will be discussed at events taking place across the globe. Each one will contribute to an adaptation action agenda that will help guide us towards a climate-resilient future by 2030. I also hope that 2021 will be a year of heightened international ambition and action on climate change after a very difficult, of course, a very difficult 2020. And that this conference will help achieve that goal. We know that climate impacts will continue to escalate even if we succeed in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. We also know that we can only tackle our climate emergency by working together. And I hope this summit can help foster this global cooperation so that we can both combat and adapt to climate change. And finally, I'd like to thank the Global Commission on Adaptation and its convening countries for your hard work and your leadership on climate adaptation. In the 3 years since you started this work, you have helped spearhead initiatives that are helping to create safer and stronger communities around the world. For this and for your selfless dedication, we owe you a major debt of gratitude. So, a heartfelt thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Prime Minister Rutte. And Minister Cora van Nieuwenhuizen, you are the initiator of this summit. Well, it started a while ago, I believe, but did you ever expect it to go online?
Well, the summit wasn't originally planned to be fully online, of course, but today with COVID, we have no other choice. And climate adaptation is simply too important to postpone this global meeting any longer. So let's all embrace the benefits that are also there. We have a smashing outreach with 30 presidents, prime ministers, heads of state, 50 ministers participating, 300 speakers from all over the world, and about 15,000 registrations. So I'm very happy with that.
Yeah, and it's a smaller footprint too.
Of course, and no security problems. There are also a lot of benefits.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Your Excellency, you have been a driving force behind adaptation action. What is your hope for this summit?
Well, it's a great pleasure, first of all. Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister, for hosting this very important summit meeting. and also Minister Cora van Huysen. And also I see Secretary General Antonio Guterres of the United Nations. And I'm also very much honored to participate as a co-chair of this inaugural Climate Adaptation Summit meeting. When I reflect on how we have responded to the global pandemic and what lessons we might have learned these past years, one quality shines through. That is the power of global partnership and collaboration. That's the most important things. In this regard, I'd like to take this opportunity to highly commend the visionary leadership of President Joe Biden of the United States for his decisive action to rejoin the Paris Climate Change Agreement as the first act of his presidency. This means the multilateralism which has been in disarray during the last 4 years is now back. Thanks to this spirit of collaboration, we now have promising pathways back to health. If we can do this to fight the pandemic, we can certainly do this and more to help hundreds of millions of people adapt to the accelerating impacts of climate change. We need to start building a better future now. The Paris Agreement recognized that mitigation and adaptation go hand in hand, that they are two equally important building blocks towards a sustainable world that leaves no one behind. Over the past 2 years, the Global Commission on Adaptation has worked hard to elevate the importance of climate adaptation. That work will now be succeeded by the Global Center on Adaptation, based in the Netherlands and led by my very able colleague, Dr. Patrick Vercoyen. The GCA's inaugural State and Trends in Adaptation report focused on the context of COVID-19. It stated that we need the 5 to 10-fold increase in funding for adaptation for just the developing world, and yet only a tiny fraction of the trillions of dollars in economic stimulus funds announced so far are being earmarked for climate adaptation. That we have to increase. The main three pillars of our summit is that raise ambition, increase, mobilize finance, as well as forge a partnership. We need a step change in adaptation to protect the world, and especially the most vulnerable people and countries from climate impact. Those of us gathered here today are in the best place to deliver it. The world has a golden opportunity to recover from our health and economic crisis by accelerating adaptation, and we must seize it. You have, I think all of us, global leaders, have a political and moral responsibility to save humanity and our planet. I sincerely hope that with all this multilateralism returning back, Secretary General Antonio Guterres, you really take this opportunity to change the world. And I count on your strong leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ban Ki-moon. And let's indeed talk to your successor at the United Nations, Mr. Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Your Excellency, we are delighted that you are able to join us live. Welcome. On December 12th, the world celebrated the 5th anniversary already of the Paris Agreement, and we have already seen a lot of commitments on getting to net zero. Do you think we are going fast enough when it comes to adapting to a climate that's changing so fast?
Not yet fast enough, but Excellencies, dear friends, I thank Prime Minister Mark Rutte, Minister Cora van Huysen, and my dear friend Ban Ki-moon for inviting me to address this important summit. And I thank the Global Commission on Adaptation for its leadership. We begin this year with a heightened awareness of the importance of resilience. The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us that we cannot afford to ignore known risks, and climate disruption is a risk we are well aware of. The science has never been clearer. We are facing a climate emergency, and we are already witnessing unprecedented climate extremes and volatility affecting lives and livelihoods on all continents. According to the World Meteorological Organization, there have been more than 11,000 disasters due to weather, climate and water-related hazards over the past 50 years at a cost of some $3.6 trillion. Extreme weather and climate-related hazards have also killed more than 410,000 people in the past decade, the vast majority in low and lower middle-income countries. And this is why I have called for a breakthrough on adaptation and resilience. We need the trillions of taxpayers' dollars funding the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic to jumpstart the low-carbon, high-resilience future we need. But recovery cannot be only for the developed world. We must expand the provision of liquidity and debt relief instruments to developing and middle-income countries that lack the resources to relaunch their economies in a sustainable and inclusive way. And I see 5 priorities to guarantee adaptation and resilience. First, donor countries and multilateral, regional, and national development banks need to significantly increase the volume and predictability of their finance for adaptation and resilience. The recent United Nations Environment Programme Adaptation Gap Report calculates annual adaptation costs in developing countries alone to be in the range of $70 billion. These figures are likely to reach 100 to 140 or eventually up to $300 billion in 2030, and the range between 280 and 500 billion in 2050. But huge gaps remain on financing for adaptation in developing countries. That is why I've called for 50% of the total share of climate finance provided by all developed countries and multilateral development banks to be allocated to adaptation and resilience in developing countries. Adaptation cannot be the neglected half of the climate equation. The African Development Bank set the bar in 2019 by allocating over half of its climate finance to adaptation. And I urge all donors and multilateral development banks to commit to this goal by COP26 and deliver on it at least by 2024. And I welcome today's commitment made by Prime Minister Mark Rutte on behalf of the government of the Netherlands. Let us remember that developed countries must meet the commitments made in the Paris Agreement to mobilize $100 billion a year from private and public sources for mitigation and adaptation in developing countries. Second, all budget allocations and investment decisions need to be climate resilient. Climate risk must be embedded in all procurement processes, particularly for infrastructure. And developing countries must receive the necessary support and the tools to achieve this. The United Nations system is ready to support this effort worldwide. Third, we need to significantly scale up existing catastrophe-triggered financial instruments, such as the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility and the African Risk Capacity. And I call also on donors, the multilateral development banks, and private finance institutions to work with vulnerable countries on developing new instruments with innovation to incentivize investments in resilience building. For every dollar invested in climate resilient infrastructure, $6 can be saved, as Prime Minister Mark Rutte just said. Fourth, we need to ease access to finance, especially for the most vulnerable, and expand debt relief initiatives. The share for least developed countries and small island developing states in total climate finance remains small, representing only 14% and 2% of flows respectively. And these countries stand on the line of the climate crisis. Yet, due to size and capacity constraints, they face significant challenges in accessing climate finance to build resilience. There must be a collective effort to remove these obstacles. And finally, we need to support regional adaptation and resilience initiatives. This would allow, for example, debt for adaptation swaps, for example, for the Caribbean or the Pacific Islands, and provide much needed liquidity to vulnerable countries in dire need. Excellencies and dear friends, support for adaptation and resilience is a moral, economic, and social imperative. Today, 1 person in 3 is still not adequately covered by early warning systems, and risk-informed early approaches are not at the scale required. As illustrated by the Global Commission on Adaptation, just 24 hours warning of a coming storm or heat wave can cut the ensuing damage by 30%. We need to work together to ensure full global coverage by early warning systems to help minimize these losses. We have the tools, skills, and opportunities to deliver more, faster, and better adaptation actions. I hope this summit helps to secure the breakthrough on adaptation and resilience that is needed, and that it leads to ambitious outcomes at COP26. Let us live up to our responsibilities and jointly change course towards a sustainable, fair, and resilient future. And I thank you.
And I thank you, Secretary General Guterres. And stay with us, please. Well, let's move to Africa, where climate change is felt on a daily basis. President Akufo-Addo from Ghana, Your Excellency, thank you very much for sharing your action. Can you hear us? President
Yes,
Akufo-Addo, can you hear us?
Me?
Could you share your action with us,
Yes, I can
please?
hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
You hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. All right. Okay.
Please share your actions with us, if you can.
All right. Okay. Your Excellencies, as co-chair of the United Nations Eminent Group of Advocates for the Sustainable Development Goals, I'm delighted to join you this afternoon virtually for this historic Climate Adaptation Summit. I thank my good friend, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, for the honor of this invitation. The climate crisis is wrecking lives and livelihoods and disproportionately affecting the poor and the most vulnerable in society. Amid the existential threat posed by climate change, this summit comes at a time when our world is faced with one of its toughest challenges yet, the COVID-19 pandemic. It is a challenge we must not only confront head-on, but one from which we must emerge as victors. It is vital that we are united in action and do all we can as soon as possible to save lives, restore livelihoods, and spur the growth of our economies. While ensuring this, it is incumbent on all of us to help protect our communities from future health, economic, and climate change shocks. In Ghana, we're committed to promoting climate adaptation action. And that is why we're pleased to be collaborating with the Global Center on Adaptation in close collaboration with the African Development Bank in pioneering solutions on how to build durable infrastructure and supporting African cities to guard against the impacts of climate change. We're also working with the private sector and with the assistance of the Green Climate Fund to establish a multi-million-dollar green fund to support our climate adaptation interventions and our efforts to transition to renewable energy. We expect these initiatives to deliver tangible progress towards Ghana's adaptation and development objectives. By laying the foundation now, we bestow to future generations stronger, safer, and healthier communities. Young people have done the least to cause climate change, and yet will suffer its impact the most. Across Africa, the continent with the world's youngest population, we must scale up the solutions that deliver green jobs and resilient livelihoods. It is for them and future generations that we must all come together and use this summit as a turning point to create a more prosperous, greener, and fairer world. We cannot fail in this endeavor, as success is the greatest inheritance that we can leave for the current and future generations. I thank Your Excellencies for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you. Over to our neighbor, Chancellor Angela Merkel from Germany. She has sent us a video message about Germany's adaptations and reduction measures.
Sehr geehrter Herr Premierminister, sehr geehrter Herr Generalsekretär, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren. Wir wissen und wir sehen es. Der Klimawandel gefährdet unsere Umwelt, unsere Wirtschaft, unsere Sicherheit überall auf der Welt. Aber gemeinsam haben wir es in der Hand, die Folgen einzudämmen. Davon bin ich überzeugt. Daher entwickelt Deutschland seine 2008 beschlossene Anpassungsstrategie an den Klimawandel regelmäßig weiter. Parallel dazu setzen wir unseren Weg der Emissionsminderungen in Richtung Klimaneutralität fort. Auch bei unserer internationalen Klimafinanzierung verfolgen wir sowohl Anpassungs- als auch Minderungsmaßnahmen. Dabei machen wir uns insbesondere stark für Klimarisikofinanzierungen und Versicherungen. Hierfür haben wir auch unseren jeweiligen Vorsitz der G7 und G20 in den vergangenen Jahren intensiv genutzt. Multilateral wird die Bundesregierung ihr Engagement weiter ausbauen und bilateral werden wir weitere 120 Millionen Euro investieren. So unterstützen wir auch die globale Partnerschaft Ensure Resilience, ihrem Ziel gerecht zu werden, bis 2025 insgesamt 500 Millionen besonders arme und gefährdete Menschen abzusichern gegen Klimarisiken wie Ernteausfälle oder Überschwemmungen. Deutschland sieht sich in der Mitverantwortung, die Resilienz armer und ärmster Länder zu stärken. Daher haben wir im Dezember zusätzliche 50 Millionen Euro für den Anpassungsfonds zugesagt, der den Zugang von Entwicklungsländern zu internationaler Klimafinanzierung verbessert. Deutschland wird auch weitere 100 Millionen Euro für den Fonds für die am wenigsten entwickelten Länder zur Verfügung stellen. Dem Klimawandel und seinen Folgen entgegenzuwirken, fällt leichter im Vertrauen darauf, dass wir weltweit partnerschaftlich an einem Strang ziehen. Für Deutschland kann ich sagen, wir packen mit an.
Thank you, Chancellor Merkel, for sharing your action. Well, when it comes to climate change, the annual COPs, the Conference of the Parties, the climate negotiations, are essential. They are the moments that define the global ambitions. And allow me to introduce His Excellency, President Sebastián Piñera from Chile, COP25 President. Welcome, President.
Good afternoon, my colleagues and friends. Each generation has its own challenges and missions. But no generation has faced such an urgent and formidable challenge as climate change and global warming, and such a great mission as survival. This is the battle of our lifetime. The human being is the smartest and more ingenious creature living on planet Earth, and yet it's the only one capable of destroying its own planet, our only planet, our planet Earth. Some people are skeptical about climate change and global warming, but the scientific evidence is overwhelming. We know too much to remain skeptical. The concentration of greenhouse gases and global temperature is the highest in the past 8,000 years. This is not a matter of opinion, ideology, or faith. It's a matter of facts and science. We need to take bold action and tackle the root of the problem, reduce our emission and increase our capture of greenhouse gases. This is why Chile pledges to become a carbon neutral country before 2050. But at the same time, we must adapt to this new climate reality. Adaptation is not an option. It's an urgent task for the benefit of this generation and those to come. Chile is fully committed to this endeavor. During our COP25 presidency, we pushed for a strong recognition of adaptation as a top priority in the global response to climate change. I would like to highlight 4 points. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us that as we fight this sanitary, social, and economic crisis, we cannot forget that adaptation to climate change needs to remain in the core of our agenda. The climate crisis continues and is affecting the most vulnerable groups in our society. We need to make sure that our economic recovery policies are in line with our climate policies to build a greener and more sustainable and resilient future. We must strengthen our capacity to anticipate future crises through early action and multilateral cooperation. In 2020, Chile was one of the first countries in the world to put forward a more ambitious National Determined Contribution, NDC, In our new NDC, we put adaptation at the heart of our commitments. We presented an ambitious adaptation plan that covers 11 sectors of our economy. And today we are working to include adaptation in our long-term climate strategy, which we will present in Glasgow during COP26. Chile has made an extraordinary effort to identify the climate vulnerability across our territory. Therefore, we created a climate risk map. This is a crucial tool to implement new policies which address local needs, takes account of the particularities of our geography, culture, and local economic circumstances. We believe that future climate risks should be part of decisions on investment plans and economic recovery. This is why our NDC includes a financial strategy that aims to mainstream adaptation in the decision-making process of the financial sector. Thank you, and I would like to reiterate the commitment of Chile to the Global Commission on Adaptation and the hard work we have ahead. To sum up, science has spoken loud and clear. Our citizens are urging us to change course. Technology provides us with the tools. It's time to change the course of history. It's time for action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Pinnier. Yeah, Mr. Rutte, you want to react?
Just because there are a few fascinating red threads going through these presentations. And one of them, of course, is the, as Antonio Guterres said, the moral, the economic and the social imperative. And the President of Chile saying the urgency of now. So that's one. Another one Antonio Guterres was stressing, and I forgot this in my introduction, is the issue of the small island development states. And I know this is very close to your heart, Mr. Secretary General. As we all know, the Netherlands is only one country in Europe and 3 countries in the Caribbean. And they all face these issues of small island development states being confronted by climate change and the need for climate adaptation. A third one, also stressed by the President of Ghana, is the issue of young people, who have only contributed very little to this problem, but they will be confronted with it to a large extent. And I visited Ghana in 2017 together with Emmanuel Macron, and I know that it's very close to the heart of the President of Ghana. And finally, both Germany, Angela Merkel, but also the President of Chile, stressing this issue of how the G20, the G7, the mainstreaming also financially, how we have to do this. So I think there are a couple of red threads now going through these presentations, which are already very interesting. I'm really keenly looking forward to the others.
Very good. Well, let's continue then. Because with the Climate Adaptation Summit 2021, COP26, as the President Pinnier already mentioned, and many more climate-related events later this year, 2021, promises to be an important year for climate ambition. And well, let me introduce COP26 President. He's the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Mr. Boris Johnson.
Stopping climate change 10, 20 or however many years from now can't and must not be the limit of our ambition. Because when we look to Bangladesh and see more powerful and more frequent storms and cyclones, when we look to California, Australia, and see soaring temperatures and raging wildfires, when we look to the island nations of the Pacific and see whole communities submerged by rising seas, we cannot deny that dramatic climate change is already happening, already devastating lives and economies. And because prevention is not only better than cure, it's cheaper too. If we fail to act in 2021, then by 2030, the annual bill for adaptation in developing countries alone will have reached as high as $300 billion. I'll be making the need for a more resilient recovery a priority of the UK's G7 presidency this year. And to make sure we get not just warm words, but real change, I'm today launching an all-new Adaptation Action Coalition, which is a joint effort between the UK, Bangladesh, Egypt, Malawi, the Netherlands, St. Lucia, and the United Nations. This coalition will draw on the expertise of businesses, scientists, civil society, and more, working with the Race to Resilience and the UN High-Level Climate Champions team to build on 2019's call for action on adaptation and setting the agenda ahead of COP26 later this year. So, Let 2021 be the year that we fight back, not just against climate change, but the effects of climate change that are already being felt.
Thank you, Prime Minister Johnson. And it brings us to Prime Minister Modi from India, who during the UN Climate Action Summit in 2019 announced a global coalition on resilient infrastructures.
Adaptation is more significant today than ever before. And it is a key element for India's development efforts. We have promised ourselves that we will not just meet our Paris Agreement targets, but exceed them. We will not just arrest environmental degradation, but reverse it. And we will not just create new capacities, but make them an agent for global good. We are going to restore 26 million hectares of degraded land by 2030. We are providing clean cooking fuel to 80 million rural households. We are connecting 64 million households to pipe water supply. And our initiatives have not been restricted to India alone. The International Solar Alliance and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure shows the power of global climate partnership. I invite all of you to the 3rd International Conference on Disaster Resilient Infrastructure later this year in India. Excellency, if we take care of Mother Earth, she will continue to nurture us. This sentiment should guide our way forward. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Modi. Well, earlier we heard Secretary General Guterres share that unlocking more adaptation finance is essential. Investing in adaptation will indeed save money in the long run, as it is more expensive to build back. We've asked leaders on their views. First, President Macron from France. Let's listen to his statement.
L'adaptation et la résilience sont en effet des mots qui ont résonné avec force et gravité ces derniers mois. Et la crise de la Covid-19 que nous sommes en train de vivre et qui secoue encore la planète tout entière a montré plus que jamais à quel point il est crucial de protéger les populations face aux chocs et leur permettre de s'en relever. Le changement climatique est l'un de ces chocs qui nous concernent tous, dont les impacts se manifestent et s'intensifient partout. C'est pourquoi il nous faut, dans l'esprit de l'accord de Paris, faire preuve d'ambition et de solidarité. Il en va de notre responsabilité à tous et de notre responsabilité à chacun. Mais il est tout aussi important d'accélérer la mise en œuvre d'actions d'adaptation sur le terrain afin de réduire la vulnérabilité de nos sociétés. Au niveau international, la France poursuit ses engagements en matière de solidarité climatique. L'Agence française de développement a déjà multiplié par 4 son soutien financier à l'adaptation depuis 2016. Et comme je m'y suis engagé le 12 décembre dernier, lors du sommet de l'ambition climatique, la France rehaussera le niveau de finances climat à plus de 6 milliards d'euros par an. Elle consacrera un tiers de celle-ci à l'adaptation. La France joue par ailleurs tout son rôle pour aider à la mobilisation au niveau mondial des financements publics et privés sur le sujet de l'adaptation. Lors du sommet Finances en commun, nous avons lancé une coalition de 450 banques publiques de développement qui se sont engagées pour la première fois à intégrer l'adaptation et la résilience dans leurs stratégies et opérations. Elles se sont également engagées à renforcer l'action pour financer l'élaboration et la mise en œuvre de plans nationaux d'adaptation. Au nord comme au sud, il nous faut repenser les infrastructures, les routes, les ports, à l'aune de l'élévation du niveau de la mer, des événements climatiques violents, de la hausse des températures moyennes et des transformations d'écosystèmes que cela engendre. Tout cela est la meilleure manière de prévoir les prochains chocs, de lutter contre les grandes transformations qui sont déjà à l'œuvre et aussi d'avoir une action utile et coordonnée contre les grandes inégalités de nos sociétés et à travers le monde. Je vous remercie.
And merci beaucoup, President Macron, for your contribution. The world is enhancing ambition on climate change, on ensuring we adapt. And I would like to introduce Mr. Han Jung, Vice Premier of the People's Republic of China.
尊敬的吕特首相，各位同事、女士们、先生们、朋友们，很高兴出席首届气候适应峰会。气候变化是全人类面临的共同挑战。应对气候变化，需要统筹兼顾、减缓和适应。这次峰会的举办，对于凝聚各方共识、推进全球气候适应行动合作具有重要意义。中国国家主席习近平在第75届联合国大会一般性辩论上宣布，中国二氧化碳排放力争于2030年前达到峰值，努力争取2060年前实现碳中和。在气候雄心峰会上，习近平主席进一步宣布中国提高国家自主贡献力度的新举措，展现了我们应对气候变化的信心和决心。中国一贯坚持减缓和适应并重原则，通过实施国家适应气候变化战略，开展自然灾害预警预报，提高防灾减灾能力，加强农林水利基础设施建设，在主动适应气候变化方面做了大量卓有成效的工作。目前，中国正在编制国家适应气候变化战略2035，将进一步强化国内适应气候变化的工作，全面提高气候风险抵御能力。女士们、先生们、朋友们，5年前，巴黎协定确定了全球适应目标，明确了对发展中国家适应行动的支持，为全球气候治理描绘了新愿景。今年是巴黎协定全面实施之年，在此，我仅提出3点倡议：第一，脚踏实地，主动落实巴黎协定。适应气候变化是发展中国家最为直接和迫切的要求。发达国家应当按照巴黎协定，切实加大对发展中国家适应气候变化的资金和技术支持。第二，加大力度，提升适应气候变化水平。各国应当根据自身实际情况，制定并执行国家适应计划，扩大适应行动的规模，增强适应行动的有效性和持久性，促进可持续发展。第三，精诚合作，形成适应气候变化强大合力。我们要树立你中有我，我中有你的命运共同体意识，坚持多边主义，开展适应气候变化国际合作，推动全球和平发展合作共赢。女士们、先生们、朋友们，我们生活在同一个地球村，各国紧密相连，人类命运与共。让我们团结一心，共同强化适应行动，携手推进全球气候治理新进程。谢谢大家。
Thank you very much, Vice Premier Han. And now, a very warm welcome to our next speaker. This must be one of his first international contributions as the newly appointed Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, Secretary John Kerry. Welcome, Mr. Kerry. Very good to have you. Welcome to this virtual meeting of world leaders. It is truly wonderful to have you. Could you please tell us about the new ambitions of the United States?
Absolutely, and thank you. It's a privilege to be able to be with you. And let me start by thanking Prime Minister Rutte and the government of the Netherlands for hosting this important and timely meeting. I'm really delighted to be here. Also want to thank, if I may, Secretary General Guterres for his tireless leadership on climate change, and of course, my friend Ban Ki-moon, who was central as we negotiated the Paris Agreement and brought it into force. And he's been a partner, not just on climate, but on many other things and challenges. 3 years ago, scientists gave us a pretty stark warning. They said we have 12 years within which to avoid the worst consequences of climate change. Now we have 9 years left, and I regret that my country has been absent for 3 of those years. In the United States, we spent $265 billion in 1 year for 3 storms, just cleaning up after those storms. Last year, 1 storm, $55 billion. We've reached the point where it is an absolute fact that it's cheaper to invest in preventing damage, or minimizing it at least, than cleaning up. Now, without question, I think everybody understands this, the best adaptation is to treat the crisis as the emergency that it is and do more to hold the Earth's temperature increase to the Paris stated 1.5 degrees. And I think scientists are more and more landing on the 1.5 as a critical figure. A 3.7 to 4.5 increase centigrade, which is exactly the path that we are on now, invites for the most vulnerable and poorest people on Earth fundamentally unlivable conditions. So our urgent reduction of emissions is compelled by public conscience and by common sense. President Biden has made fighting climate change a top priority of his administration. We have a president now, thank God, who leads, tells the truth, and is seized by this issue. And President Biden knows that we have to mobilize in unprecedented ways to meet a challenge that is fast accelerating, and he knows we have limited time to get it under control. For that reason, the United States immediately rejoined the Paris Agreement, and we intend to do everything we possibly can to ensure that COP26 results in ambitious climate action in which all major emitter countries raise ambition significantly, and in which we help protect those who are the most vulnerable. We have already launched our work to prepare a new US nationally determined contribution that meets the urgency of the challenge, and we aim to announce our NDC as soon as practicable. The administration also intends to make significant investments in climate action, both domestically and as part of our efforts to build back better from COVID. And internationally, we intend to make good on our climate finance pledge. In the long term, driving towards net zero emissions no later than 2050 and keeping a 1.5 degree limit within reach remain the best policies for climate resilience and adaptation. There is simply no adapting to a 3 or 4 degree world except for the very richest and most privileged. At the same time, we have to also build resilience to protect communities from the impacts of climate change that are already built in to the emissions that are in the atmosphere. Now, some of these impacts are inevitable because of the warming that's already taken place. But if we don't act boldly and immediately by building resilience to climate change, we are likely going to see dramatic reversals in economic development for everybody. Poor and climate vulnerable communities everywhere will obviously pay the highest price. So the United States will work on 3 fronts to promote ambition and resilience on adaptation. Leverage US innovation and climate data and information to promote a better understanding and management of climate risk, especially in developed countries. We will significantly increase the flow of finance, including concessional finance, to adaptation and resilience initiatives. We will work with bilateral and multilateral institutions to improve the quality of resilience programming. And we will work with the private sector in the United States and elsewhere in developing countries to promote greater collaboration between businesses and the communities on which they depend. And it is our firm conviction throughout all of our administration, every agency is now part of our climate team. And only together are we going to be able to build the resilience to climate change that is critical to save lives and meet our moral obligation to future generations and to those currently living in very difficult circumstances. So we're proud to be back. We come back, I want you to know, with humility for the absence of the last 4 years, and we'll do everything in our power to make up for it.
Well, Mr. Kerry, it's wonderful to have you back. Thank you very much. And the world is grateful for the reinstatement of climate ambition from the USA. Thank you very much. Yeah, Mr. Rutte, what do you say?
Well, Sasha, I'm so happy to hear John Kerry say this, because we need the US to be back at the center of the action. We need the leadership of the United States, European Union, China, Asia, because otherwise we can never cope with this. And I think also, interestingly, there are two themes coming through the previous presentations. One is about coalition building. And we heard Prime Minister Boris Johnson talk about coalitions around the globe, from Egypt through to Bangladesh.
And also with the Netherlands, by the way.
Absolutely, and the Netherlands. And we are close friends. Then we heard Narendra Modi. He spoke about coalitions built around themes like infrastructure and, for example, water-resilient infrastructure. And China, the Vice Prime Minister of China, talking about the need for China to particularly help in the developing countries, for example, in Africa, where they can add value. And we heard Emmanuel Macron. This was another theme coming through, which is that we need to spend money not only on mitigation, but also on adaptation. And France now committing to spend 1/3 of its overall climate investments on adaptation, which is a fantastic commitment. So I think this was a great round of speakers, and particularly to have the US back at the center is fantastic news.
Thank you, thank you. Well, we cannot discuss finance, of course, without the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and its managing director, Kristalina Georgieva. Ms. Georgieva, you have been one of the biggest drivers on climate financing. How can we scale up adaptation finance?
First, many thanks to Prime Minister Rutte for bringing us in this special moment. And since I'm the first to take the floor after John Kerry, warm welcome to the United States back in the Paris Agreement. To tackle this grave challenge of climate change, we need all hands on deck. And certainly the US is so critical for success. Saying all hands on deck, that also means international organization playing our role. For us at the IMF, we see climate as a fundamental risk to economic and financial stability. And we see climate action as an opportunity to reinvigorate growth, especially after the pandemic, and to generate new green jobs. So for us, it is mission critical. Our research shows that if we combine rising carbon prices with the green infrastructure push to bring emissions down and adapt to climate change, we can boost global GDP over the next 15 years by 0.7% higher growth, and we will create millions of new green jobs. So what does action mean for us at the IMF? First, integrating climate in our annual country economic assessment. They're known in the world as Article 4 consultations. In highly vulnerable countries, we focus on adaptation, and we are also building up mitigation analysis, including carbon pricing, in our assessment of large emitters. Second, including climate-related financial stability risks in our financial sector surveillance through standardized disclosure of these risks, enhanced stress tests, and assessments of supervisory framework. Make the money go where they must. Third, scaling up climate in our capacity development so we can help equip finance ministries and central banks with the skills needed to take climate considerations into account. And fourth, mainstream climate indicators in macroeconomic data. Unless we do it, we won't take that important shift. So this year, we are going to launch a climate change dashboard indicators to track the economic impact of climate risks and the measures taken to mitigate them. So let me finish. Climate resilience is a critical priority, and this is why we place it at the heart of what we do this year and in the years to come.
Thank you very much, Kristalina Georgieva from IMF. Well, let's go to the other side of the world, to Gabon. President Bongo, his country has been a leading example in climate ambition in Africa.
Prime Minister Rutte, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, co-chairs of the Global Adaptation Summit. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the devastating effects of climate change are on the rise, especially on the African continent. Unchecked, climate change would create hundreds of millions of climate refugees in Africa by the middle of the century. In response to that challenge, African heads of state launched the Africa Adaptation Initiative, AAI, at COP21 in Paris. Our objective was to ensure that the continent urgently adapts to the adverse effects of climate change. Today, the COVID-19 crisis is eroding our hard-earned developmental gains, as well as adding fuel to the continent's existing climate crisis. Still, Africa has no choice but to adapt and chart a climate-resilient future. As the champion of the Africa Adaptation Initiative, I have taken the lead to accelerate action by committing domestic financial resources to AAI and by promoting strategic partnership. Therefore, I'm extremely pleased to see the strong collaboration emerging between the AAI and the Global Center on Adaptation, GCA, which has just been formalized by signing an MOU between the GCA and AAI, with the GCA as the AAI lead coordination partner. GCA will work to implement the vision and roadmap of the AAI.
Thank you very much, President Bongo. Next to Grenada, Grenada is a small island development state. Welcome, Prime Minister of Grenada, Keith Mitchell.
It is my pleasure to participate in this summit, convened at a time when the global community is reeling under the combined effects of COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, biodiversity loss, and socioeconomic stagnation. It is heartening to see that as a global community, we are all on board, committing to such action. I am therefore pleased to say today that Grenada has delivered on its climate adaptation and mitigation commitments through its National Adaptation Plan, its second nationally determined contributions, and its National Sustainable Development Plan 2020 to 2035. Through our flagship adaptation project, Climate Resilience in the Water Sector, Grenada has embarked on the total transformation of the sector with the kind support of the Green Climate Fund and GIZ. We are also developing a Smart Cities Adaptation Project, which we hope will serve as a model for small island developing states. Combining our ambitious climate adaptation actions with support from our development partners, including our collaboration with the Global Center on Adaptation, will determine our success in facing the unprecedented global crisis and developing sustainable recovery for the benefit of future generations.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Keith Mitchell. Well, we heard from the powerful initiative from the IMF to change the financial system, but systematic change is needed from many multilateral institutions. We are joined by Mr. David Malpass, the President of the World Bank Group. President Malpass, thank you for joining. May I ask you to share your views?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Prime Minister Rutte, Secretaries General, Your Excellencies. The World Bank recognizes and appreciates the Netherlands' leadership and expertise on adaptation. I've previously described the World Bank Group's broader efforts on climate finance, where the World Bank is the largest multilateral funder, is at record funding levels, and is committed to increasing further. I'll focus today on action on adaptation, which is a core activity in the World Bank Group's development activities. Our financing for adaptation increased from 40% of climate finance in 2016 to over 50% in 2020, and we've committed to making it half of our total climate finance for the next 5 years. I'd like to give some examples of tangible outcomes. In 6 West African countries, we're working to protect against coastal erosion, restore wetlands and mangroves, and build seawalls and dikes. In Niger, we're working to improve the management of agricultural lands and increase crop yields. In Mozambique, we're building resilient roads and transport links in response to recent devastating cyclones. This is critical so that people can access health services and farmers can get their crops to market. And in 11 countries across Africa's dry lands, the World Bank Group plans to invest over $5 billion over the next 5 years to improve livelihoods and restore degradation. This investment is a major contribution to the Great Green Wall. In small island states across the Caribbean, Pacific, and Africa, we support risk management readiness operations and deferred drawdown options. These help countries build institutions and strategies to handle national emergencies caused by natural disasters and to access instant funding when disasters strike. And beyond providing direct finance, we're taking steps to strengthen resilience in our projects. We're boosting capacity to respond to shocks by investing in better social protection systems, weather observation systems, and early warning and evacuation systems. These are particularly valuable for the small island states. Our goal is to help keep communities safe and help them develop in ways that are resilient during climate change. We look forward to working closely with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Malpass. Well, what do you say? It's huge investments.
Absolutely, and this is a commitment which the World Bank has made previously, but now it is happening. The 50% is a huge target, but it is also, I think, helping with a few of the common themes coming through the last 4 presentations. Both the President of Gabon and the Prime Minister of Grenada stressing the need to implement at a national level what they are doing in terms of commitment on adaptation and mitigation. And the World Bank is crucial here to help with this knowledge. You know, the World Bank is also helping the Kingdom of the Netherlands in the Caribbean in some of the rebuilding efforts we are doing at the moment, and that's crucial help. Another common theme is from Kristalina Georgieva. She is a fantastic leader and has always stressed in all her roles previously and also in this capacity that there is a huge opportunity for growth, economic growth, coming out of green jobs. My personal vision for the Netherlands is that by 2030, building back better after COVID-19, we will see that from the 10 million jobs we have now in the Netherlands, that probably a quarter to maybe 1/3 of those jobs will be in professions we don't even know of yet. So we have now to invest in a way in our innovation portfolio, in our capacity for research and development. And this is true not only for developed countries, but also for developing countries, to make sure that not only we make our world adaptive to what is happening in terms of climate change, but also to create those green jobs and future business opportunities which will lead to more overall wealth for our country. So there is a huge opportunity, and Kristalina, thanks for your leadership in showing us the way.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rutte. And now I've heard, Mr. Guterres, you have to leave us now, unfortunately. I hope you're not looking surprised now, but thank you very much for joining us. You were a very honored guest to have you. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, thank you very much for joining us this last hour.
Thank you very much and congratulations. A remarkable summit. Thank you very much.
Antonio. See you next time.
Thank you very much. Well, we have just listened to government leaders, multilateral development banks and international institutions all committing to action and showing what can and should be done. But there are more stakeholders for action. Last Friday, in the Netherlands city of Groningen, only the Dutch can pronounce this well, I believe, Groningen, youth and science shared their call to action.
People and organizations from all over the world participated in the Dutch Climate Adaptation Week Groningen from the 19th until the 25th of January 2021. An intense, interactive online program invited participants to join forces. Merely by cooperating, we can produce smart solutions to accelerate climate adaptation. An urgent call with no time to lose, especially for the most vulnerable regions of the world. Main deliverables of the Climate Adaptation Week Groningen. 1. The Science Declaration. The University of Groningen invited scientists from all over the world to unite in a joint appeal to our world leaders. It calls to manage and protect natural ecosystems, work on a long-term revolution with regard to public and private investments, to accelerate climate adaptation, and last but not least, to invest in education. 2. The Global Youth Call to Action. Young people around the world are calling for climate justice, as well as more social and economic equality. It's their future as well as their children's future. Our youth calls upon governments and all stakeholders to implement the global call to action on adaptation, in addition to the mitigation efforts and Paris Agreement targets, in order to secure a healthy, safe and green future. 3. The Manifesto for Climate Adaptive Design, in which 9 international design agencies come up with 10 design principles on how to successfully approach climate adaptive design of public space and landscape in Groningen and in the rest of the world. Groningen reaches out to every city and region in the world because climate adaptation is a joint responsibility. We must continue to act and adapt. It's what we do.
We just saw Patrick Verkooyen, Professor Climate Adaptation Governance at the University of Groningen for a very short while in this video. He's also CEO of the Global Center on Adaptation. Welcome, Mr. Verkooyen. And welcome to Joshua Amponsem. He's a youth representative. You are on the video. I will ask you a few questions later. Mr. Verkooyen, you launched this science declaration last Friday. How does this help the agenda?
Well, thank you, Sasha. Indeed, the COVID crisis is like the climate emergency is everybody's business. Last Friday, over 3,000 scientists from across the globe, over 120 countries, 5 Nobel laureates launched this Groningen declaration. Why is it important? 3 things. 1, climate adaptation has to be at the heart of the economic recovery from COVID. It's good for our health, for the planet and the economy. 2, we need to translate our agenda from advocacy into empowerment. Education is key. So I'm delighted that today we're launching the first ever massive open online capacity building program to support those living on the front lines. And 3, specifically for Africa, it's important that we unleash the entrepreneurial spirit of young people. Together with the African Development Bank, President Adesina, we're launching a massive program here as well. So we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build forward better. On behalf of our co-chair of the GCA, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, and Feike Sijbesma, count us in.
Very good. Well, let's hear from a youth representative, Joshua Amponsem. What is your message to world leaders?
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I speak to you today on behalf of the hundreds of thousands of young people brought together by the GCA to produce a youth call to action. Because while we must continue to accelerate progress towards a net zero world, young people, especially young women, and those from indigenous communities are already feeling the impacts of climate change now. Our call to action shows we want to play our part in building a resilient future, but we need your support. Empower us through mandatory climate change education, and the MOOC is a brilliant opportunity to start with that. But we need this also in curriculums at the national level, and also for informal young people to get the skills. Equip up with training for green jobs that focuses specifically on adaptation, and finance us as we develop innovative solutions to adapt for our future. And very important, by the time I am at this age, sitting where you are as world leaders, it will be too late. And this is very critical. So right now, right here, your commitments will determine if the youth on the front lines become a climate migrant or a climate refugee, or they become a climate leader at the next extreme weather event. So please take action now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joshua. And thank you also, Patrick Verkooyen. Thank you. Yeah, the Climate Adaptation Summit is an action-oriented summit, and it's already working very well. We indeed need to incorporate youth in the decision-making process. I hereby would like to welcome Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada, who will talk about the importance of engaging youth.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Right now, we're all dealing with the health and economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Job one is to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes to protect people and economies from this virus. But as we work to keep people safe today, we must also plan for the recovery of tomorrow. And that must include an ambitious plan to take strong action to fight and build resilience against climate change. Les jeunes le comprennent mieux que quiconque. Ils savent que nous devons protéger les espèces végétales et animales, rétablir l'équilibre de la nature et préserver notre planète pour les générations futures. Et ils comptent sur nous pour agir maintenant pour leur avenir. That's why Canada has outlined a strong climate plan that will adapt to the impacts of climate change, create jobs, and build a cleaner and more competitive country for everyone. And together with Mexico, we're leading the Global Commission's Nature-Based Solutions Action Track to find more ways to use the power of nature to protect it. And we're continuing to work with international partners to build a more sustainable world, because to effectively fight climate change at home, we must fight it everywhere. But to continue to take on this challenge, we need the voices of young people. That's why Canada supported the Young Leaders Program for the Global Commission, and why we welcome the launch of a new Young Leadership Program to bring together the next generation of leaders to help tackle climate change. So thank you to everyone for joining us in this fight, and thank you to the young people for stepping up and getting involved. Together, we will build a cleaner, safer, and more competitive world. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Prime Minister Trudeau. Going to the other side of the world, I welcome President Alvarado of Costa Rica to join us live as well. President Alvarado, Your Excellency, could you tell us, what does leadership on adaptation mean to you?
Good day, and to you all. As I recently expressed to Prime Minister Rutte, the climate crisis is being relentless. It is the challenge of our generation. The 2020 hurricane season in Central America once again showed the grave impacts that climate crisis will continue to bring if we don't do something to transform our mindset to a new and greener, inclusive paradigm and a new social contract. Migrations, loss of jobs, many things have been going on due to this crisis. Climate change is a matter of human rights. In Latin America, we're seeing the upsurge of climate migrations, job losses, and a plethora of health issues closely linked to the climate emergency. Costa Rica has updated its NDC to set up its ambitions and proceed with stronger adaptation and mitigation actions and commitments. The flagship report of the Global Commission on Adaptation, Adapt Now, made the case for revolutions in understanding, planning, and financing. We need to push for a revolution in understanding the projects, such as Plan A, an initiative that is developing current and future climate risk assessment for the 82 cantons in Costa Rica. We are pushing for a revolution in planning by providing technical guidelines, assistance, and capacity building to local governments to incorporate adaptation actions in their strategic and territorial planning process. In the spirit of the Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement, we are driving a revolution in financing by designing a funding strategy to scale up adaptation actions on the ground. This will include new financing mechanisms through payment of environmental services programs and other counter-price fiscal and tariff instruments, as well as the inclusion of adaptation criteria in national financing and planning instruments, and in nature-based solutions as adaptation alternatives. The history of Costa Rica shows that pushing for innovation welfare and development models is possible. Once again, I would like to thank the government of the Netherlands, Prime Minister Rutte, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, Chair of the Commission of Adaptation, and Mr. Patrick Werkeligen, CEO of Global Center of Adaptation, for organizing this crucial event. As global leaders, we must step up ambition, scale up adaptation, and act now. Paraphrasing words of Sir David Attenborough, let us show that a climate resilient pathway is not only something we need, but something we want. So thank you very much for your leadership, and let's keep working together.
Thank you very much, President Alvarado. Well, the sound was a bit difficult to hear, but the message is clear. We must act now. Adaptation requires leadership, as we need to have systems and policies changed to cope with the new climate reality. Let's listen to Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina of Bangladesh. It's a country that she calls the ground zero of climate change.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bangladesh is often referred to as the ground zero for climate change adverse impacts. Adapting to the damage already done is as important as the process of reducing future losses and damage. But global adaptation actions are far from keeping pace with the scale of devastation due to the lack of finance and political will. The COVID-19 has proved the importance of being united and acting on time. Bangladesh has emerged as a global leader on locally led adaptation measures, and with the support of the Netherlands, we have developed the Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100. To celebrate the birth centenary of our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, we have planted 11.5 million saplings and launched a program called Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan. We have undertaken 789 projects for $443 million from our own Climate Change Trust Fund based on locally led measures. Additionally, as the president of the CBF and the host of the South Asian Office of Global Center on Adaptation, we are promoting locally led adaptation that can bring forth tangible solutions for the vulnerable communities in different countries of the world.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina of Bangladesh. And she talked about the Bangladesh Delta Plan together with the Netherlands.
Yes, and Sheikh Hasina and I have talked a lot about this, and we are working closely with Bangladesh. This is an example of how we can help each other. So I'm very happy that she has always been very open about the issues Bangladesh is facing, and therefore also making it possible for the rest of the region to work on the issues around climate change. I also wanted to highlight Costa Rica, because Costa Rica is one of the world's most friendliest countries in terms of climate, environment, etc. And it is an example of a country which is maybe not big in size or big in the overall size of its economy, but it has a huge impact because their voice has the voice of authority. because we know what they are capable of. And therefore, when Costa Rica speaks, we put down our pen and we listen. So I was very happy, our pencil down. I was very happy that the president of Costa Rica was in this call. And finally, Justin Trudeau of Canada was also highlighting, of course, the issue of the leadership of the young generation, the youth, but he was also highlighting something else, which is the nature-based solution. So how to build with nature. Like in the Netherlands, we have this program of Room for the River, so that when our rivers are overflowing, that there is enough space for them to do that. And this is also an issue which is close to what China is doing at the moment. Building with nature-based solutions, building on a more climate adaptation. So I think these are some excellent examples we have heard so far, and I'm very happy about it.
Yeah, one of those examples from Bangladesh, from Sheikh Hasina, is her forest investment plan.
Yes.
And planting back mangroves. And that's a real solution there. We cannot do this in the Netherlands, of course.
No, not for us, but I mean, this is also they're across the world and far apart, but also Costa Rica has some of the world's most beautiful mangroves. Mm-hmm. You need them also as part of your natural system and your ecosystem. Of course, if that is possible in that part of the world. Here in the Netherlands, it would probably be a bit more difficult. But at least it can help to at least keep the thing together.
Good. Let's go to Kenya. Your Excellency, President Kenyatta, warm welcome to you. Let's hear from your point of view, please.
Thank you very much. And let me begin by saying how pleased I am to join you in this critical discussion on climate adaptation. Climate change, as my fellow speakers have said, like COVID-19, is without doubt a reality that we must deal with now. And this summit, therefore, is timely and a reminder that as we seek to build back better from the COVID-19 pandemic, we must also learn from each other and strengthen our partnerships to drive resilience to climate change. This summit is particularly important to us on the African continent, where a majority of our people are small-scale farmers who rely on agriculture for their livelihood. Given its sensitivity to climate change, agriculture will remain a key priority to our climate adaptation agenda, and we must give our farmers the tools, the information, the education, and the financial support that they need to enable them to adapt to sustainable practices and respond to changing weather patterns, as well as to enhance their productivity. Kenya, for example, is already experiencing the multifold climate impacts, including erratic rainfall, droughts, and increased temperatures. And to contain this situation, we have scaled up our adaptation efforts, mainstreaming them into our national development strategy. And I expect that the Global Center for Adaptation, Africa, hosted by the African Development Bank, will be a key partner in this particular endeavor. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we are here, and I am here to once again give Kenya's commitment to implement the Adaptation Action Agenda, but we can only succeed if we all as a global community collaborate in this noble endeavor. By pulling together, we will emerge stronger and more resilient, and indeed we can expect to reap the triple dividends of both reducing emissions, spurring economic growth, and delivering social and environmental benefits. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Prime Minister Rutte, to thank my good friend Ban Ki-moon and his foundation, and all participants for making sure that we are here talking together, recognizing that the time for action is now. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, President Kenyatta. And let me say that we will talk to the President of the African Development Bank in just a few moments. All right, allow me to give the floor to Aruba. I would almost say, let's stay in the Netherlands, but it's on the other side of the ocean. It is part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Prime Minister Wever-Kroes.
Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor today to join you at the Climate Adaptation Summit. As a small island located in the Caribbean, Aruba is proud of being home to the Bukuti and Tara Beach Resort, which last year became the first hotel ever to win the UN FCCC 2020 Climate Action Award. This private sector initiative sets a world standard for the hospitality and the tourism industry, and it serves as a splendid example for the sector to help address climate change. The government of Aruba is committed to further climate adaptation action toward becoming a climate-resilient island. Aruba's Recovery Master Plan is devised to propel smart, inclusive, and sustainable growth, which include climate-resilient practices and solutions, as these need to be embedded in how we build back better and stronger. I look towards actions on innovative financing mechanisms and partnerships as an outcome of this conference to include also middle-income countries and small island development states to bridge the financing and the investment gaps that they are confronted with. Together, humanity is facing climate change, and I have a firm belief that humanity has shown time and time again to rise up to meet the challenge that we as a world are facing. We can and we must. I thank you.
Thank you for showing leadership on accelerating adaptation action, Prime Minister. Well, let's go to our next speaker. That's Cardinal Secretary of the State of Pietro Parolin, who has a message from Pope Francis, the Supreme Pontiff, head of the Roman Catholic Church.
On behalf of Pope Francis, I am pleased to extend a cordial greeting to all of you and wish to assure you of his closeness, support, and encouragement in these days of intense effort for a fruitful outcome to this Climate Adaptation Summit. This is a moral and humanitarian imperative, especially since the greatest negative consequences of climate change often affect the most vulnerable, the poor and future generations. While the poor are the least responsible for global warming, they are the most likely to be affected, since they have the least adapted capacity and often live in geographical areas which are particularly at risk. May we make the response to climate change an opportunity for improving overall living conditions, health, transport, energy, and security, and for creating new job opportunities. This task is difficult and complex, but we know that we have the freedom, intelligence, and capacity to lead and direct technology and to put it at the service of another type of progress, one that is more human, social, and integral. We should show also that we have the political will and motivation to advance this forward-looking endeavor. We have no alternative but to make every effort to implement a responsible, unprecedented collective response intended to work together to build our common home.
For sharing Pope Francis's words with us. Well, Prime Minister Rutte, what would you like to say after hearing all these words from world leaders to the Pope as well?
Yes, it's really great that the Holy Father is also participating in this way in this conference, because the Vatican might be small. The impact the Pope has, the Holy Father has, in terms of his worldwide presence and the fact that he will be heard around the world cannot be underestimated. So we need that leadership, of course, from NGOs, but also from religious leaders. And the Catholic Church, of course, being one of the biggest in terms of its global impact. So I'm very happy that he participates. I was also very proud about Evelyn Wever-Kroes's message from Aruba. Aruba is one of the small island development states being part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And they have always shown leadership. In the last 10, 20 years, they have worked on making that island greener, more environmentally friendly. And in that sense, it is also a beacon in terms of its role in the region, in the Caribbean region. And of course, Kenya, President Kenyatta, what he said particularly about small-scale farmers. I would like to just highlight how important that is and how much we all, also from the Netherlands, we all want to help, because we know in countries like Kenya, but also, for example, in Nigeria, which will grow in population probably to 400 million people by 2050, Nigeria. So we have to acknowledge that issue and that impact it has on the agricultural system and particularly on the economy and the small-scale farmers is crucial, is huge. And if we do this in the right manner, I'm absolutely convinced we can build economic growth opportunities, but also work on climate adaptation. So I was very happy to hear that particular perspective.
Yeah, very good, very good. Well, adaptation is essential to ensure resilience of local communities, small farmers and regions. And you've also learned that action requires partnerships and that adaptation on the ground cannot be done without finance. So, Mr. Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, thank you for joining us. Could you tell us what your vision is on creating action on the ground?
Well, thank you very much. Your Excellencies, as we gather here today for the Climate Adaptation Summit, I would like to commend the visionary leadership of Prime Minister Rutte and the former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Climate change is changing hopes and livelihoods dramatically. Africa's growth is being compromised by climate change. The sight of locust swarms devastating thousands of hectares of cropland in East Africa was shocking. Perennial droughts and encroaching deserts lay bare the vulnerability of the Sahel of Africa, scorching lives into misery and driving migration. Yes, we see all these things. Now we must feel. Now we must act. Now we must deliver on accelerated climate adaptation for Africa. The African Development Bank is at the forefront of climate finance for Africa. The bank has quadrupled its finance for climate to reach $25 billion by 2025. We have increased the percentage of our climate financing devoted to climate adaptation from 26% in 2016 to 55% by 2019. We launched the Desert to Power Initiative, a $20 billion initiative to build the world's largest solar zone in the Sahel. And at the One Planet Summit with President Macron, I announced that the bank will mobilize $6.5 billion in support of the Great Green Wall of the Sahel. The former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and I, together with Faye Kay and Patrick, have jointly established the Global Center for Adaptation in Africa, GCA Africa, based at the African Development Bank. The African Development Bank and GCA Africa have launched the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program to mobilize $25 billion to scale up transformative actions on climate adaptation. The program needs your very strong support. It's time for developed countries to meet the $100 billion per year in climate finance promised to developing countries. My late mentor, Kofi Annan, the former UN Secretary General as well, once told me, the only promises that matter are the promises kept. Let's turn words into action, hope into reality, promises into financing for Africa. Together we adapt, together we prosper. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adesina, from the President of the African Development Bank. Well, we have covered the world from Canada to India and from Aruba to Kenya. The sense of urgency is present. We really need to act now. Luckily, organizations such as the African Development Bank feel this sense of urgency as well. Well, let's move to a few more non-state actors to hear about their perspectives. We are now joined live by Executive Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Frans Timmermans. Welcome to you. Could you tell us what the ambitions of the European Commission are on climate adaptation?
Well, first of all, let me congratulate Mark Rutte and Ban Ki-moon for this incredible initiative. I think it's both timely and urgent. The fact that we're not meeting in the Netherlands is due to a pandemic, and us being online is a form of adaptation. We adapt our behavior to help stop the spread of a deadly virus. And that is not resigning to the virus. We also want to fight this virus and make sure it no longer has a harmful influence on humanity. But this is a huge effort, but it's necessary. We cannot only find vaccines, we also have to adapt our behavior, even if it's only temporarily. And I think you need to approach the climate crisis in exactly the same way. Working on adaptation is not resigning ourselves to the climate crisis. No, it's part of our fight against the climate crisis. It's part of a fight also against a threatening ecocide that is a direct threat to human existence. And we need to do it now. We need to do it quickly, and we need to do it in a way that does not leave people behind. And as we've seen also in this pandemic, we will see it with climate change. We're seeing the effects already. It's always the poorest who pay the highest price. It's always the poorest who are the most vulnerable. That's why we need to present, also from the European Union, an adaptation strategy. We will do this, the European Commission will do this next month. Global collaboration will be at the center of all our actions. We will support adaptation solutions that are easy to implement and accessible to countries around the world. Protecting and restoring nature will be crucial, as healthy forests, oceans, and other ecosystems are essential for climate adaptation, as Prime Minister Rutte has already said. In relation to this, we also encourage all heads of state and government to join the Leaders' Pledge for Nature. We cannot allow climate impacts to hit the most vulnerable the way the virus is hitting them now. And we will have to intensify our work with partner countries. If we want to succeed in COP in Glasgow, everybody needs to be on board. But then we have to show the richest part of the world that there is a form of international solidarity that is real and credible. There's no vaccine for this, but there is a solution. There's no need to despair, but we do have to have a sense of urgency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Timmermans.
Wow.
Yeah, you have to leave now.
Yes, but before I do, can I just say that I'm so happy with the last two contributions. Frans Timmermans, what he is saying, but also what you heard from the African Development Bank. It's not just money. It's also about being able to leverage the collective knowledge in these institutions. The fact that the European Commission can have an impact worldwide, yes, with money, with leveraging what Europe is doing, but also with all the combined knowledge Europe has, the Netherlands has, Germany has, all the other countries have in the European Union, and to make it effective in other parts of the world is fantastic. But also the African Development Bank and also other regional development banks and the IMF, the World Bank. Yes, it is, of course, about currency, about helping with funds, but it is also about being able to put practical help in the day-to-day issues. And the fact that they are doing that, providing the outside-in view is crucial. And indeed, I have to leave, but I can also salute Ban Ki-moon. He could have said after he left the Secretary General of the United Nations that he would now retire in Korea and have a wonderful life.
But he didn't.
But he didn't. He put his energy, his vision, his network to use. And I'm so happy that you do this, that you have not left us, but that you are still so active and leading this effort. And we need that. And again, it gives us all the energy to continue. So thank you, Ban Ki-moon, for doing this.
And thank you very much for your contributions, Prime Minister Mark Rutte. We will see you back again at the closing session.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much.
Looking forward to that.
And your hosting role for the summit will now be taken over by Minister van Nieuwenhuizen. Thank you very much for being here. Well, adaptation is not only a governmental matter. We've heard about the need for the private sector to be engaged. But there are also other non-state actors, such as the NGOs that operate all over the world, truly creating action on the ground. Mrs. Agnes Kalibata, the president from AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, shares her views.
For many of us that grew up in modest households in Africa, 2005-2015 was a period of hope. You see, over 40 countries in sub-Saharan Africa had committed to making agriculture work for smallholder farmers. And countries like Ethiopia, Ghana, Rwanda, Burkina Faso started posting agricultural growth of about 8%. We thought that Africa had finally found a path to inclusive agricultural growth and that many more would follow and reduce hunger and poverty. We did not see climate change coming. We did not expect the reversal of hard-won gains. Planting seasons changed. For a continent that depends on rainfall, productivity gains for smallholder farmers shrank, and centuries of traditional knowledge of agricultural systems started getting eroded. I was Minister of Agriculture in Rwanda. I saw efforts to get African farmers access to the world's best improved seed and other inputs leave farmers and governments more indebted rather than increase productivity, validating the notion that farmers one shock away from poverty. The fact that we are coming together to make this commitment is a welcome move that many of us that have lived the plight of Africa's farmers welcome and support. The stakes have never been higher. African countries have committed to adaptation frameworks. At AGRA, we will build on these efforts to strengthen adaptation of farming communities. We commit to strengthen collaboration and scale innovation to deliver the most effective results and international partnership. We will build on the work of the Global Commission on Adaptation to deliver tangible solutions to climate change for African farmers. I ask each of you to commit to this call, for the time is now.
Thank you, Ms. Kalibata from AGRA. And with me here in the studio is now Mr. Feike Siebesma, Honorary Chairman of Royal DSM and also co-chair of the Climate Business Leaders of the World Economic Forum, and many, many more things, but then your time would be up if I would say everything you are doing. But Mr. Siebesma, how can the private sector move this agenda forward?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for this summit, and climate change is, of course, threatening the world. We all know that. We anchored our approach in the Paris Treaty, but we also know we are not on track yet. And climate change is further impacting, especially the developing countries now already. So therefore, this summit, to make ourselves more resilient and to adapt. And therefore, with Ban Ki-moon, myself as co-chair, and Patrick Verkooyen as CEO, this Global Center for Adaptation. And what we do there is we develop the best practices, how to address climate in an adaptive way. So how to make food production more resilient, or our cities, or our infrastructure. And those best practices can be rolled out, can be used by the vulnerable countries. And that is what we need. And this is not only a country thing, like you said. This is also a business topic. Out of its own interest, business needs to be resilient, its own infrastructure, supply chains, etc. But also because it provides 0.7% economic growth. It provides jobs. And therefore, business is involved. And at this moment, globally, we spent about 30 billion. Last year, it went a little bit down on adaptation. We need to make it tenfold of this. So therefore, good that Prime Minister Rutte and Mr. van Nieuwhuizen said, let's make it 50-50 on mitigation and adaptation for this and for next generations. And therefore, I would say, on climate mitigation, it is the race to net zero. On climate adaptation, it's the race to hopefully full resilience. And that is what we need, private and public sector together.
Let's all do it together. We're in this global community, as we heard earlier from one of the presidents. I think it was from Gabon.
Yeah.
It's very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Siebesma. Well, climate adaptation is a truly complex topic. To find the best solution, all the different sectors have to collaborate, just as you said. They have to do it together. The key word during this summit is action. We need to act, we need to adapt on a global, regional and local scale. And now we will be welcoming the remarks from President Moon Jae-in from South Korea, President Widodo from Indonesia, Prime Minister Phuc from Vietnam and President Kabua from the Marshall Islands, stating their actions on the ground in the next videos.
파리협정 이행 원년을 맞아 기후 적응을 위한 지혜를 모으는 첫 정상회의에 함께한 것을 기쁘게 생각합니다. 기후 적응은 인간이 자연과 함께 살아가기 위한 지혜이자 인류가 기후 위험으로부터 안전하게 살아가기 위한 노력입니다. 파리협정은 온실가스 감축에 주목했던 과거의 노력에 더해 모든 당사국이 함께하는 기후 적응을 기후변화 대응의 핵심 요소로 규정했고 인류와 지구를 위한 기념비적 승리라는 평가를 받았습니다. 한국 국민들은 자신이 좀 불편해도 자연과 더불어 살겠다는 강한 의지를 갖고 있으며 기후변화에 적응하려는 인류의 노력에 선제적이고 적극적으로 함께해 왔습니다. 개발도상국의 기후 적응 노력에도 힘을 보태겠습니다. 매년 진행해온 적응 역량 지원 프로그램을 확대 발전시켜 올해부터는 유엔 기후변화협약 사무국과 공동으로 기후적응 아카데미를 운영할 예정입니다. 글로벌 적응위원회의 적극적인 참여를 기대합니다. 오는 5월 한국 서울에서 제2차 P4G 정상회의가 열립니다. 기후 적응을 포함하여 기후 위기 극복과 녹색 회복을 위한 실질적인 논의의 장이 될 수 있도록 개최국으로서 최선을 다하겠습니다. 제2차 P4G 정상회의에도 깊은 관심과 참여를 당부드립니다. 감사합니다.
Yang mulia, dampak iklim sangat nyata di hadapan kita, apalagi untuk negara kepulauan seperti Indonesia. Perubahan siklus iklim mengharuskan petani dan nelayan beradaptasi menghadapi ketidakpastian. Meningkatnya permukaan laut mengharuskan penduduk pesisir dan pulau kecil untuk tetap dapat bertahan. Meningkatnya bencana alam termasuk banjir dan kekeringan mengharuskan rakyat bersiap siaga. Pandemi COVID-19 membuat tantangan semakin kompleks dan berat. Untuk itu, kita harus mengambil langkah luar biasa. Pertama, semua negara harus memenuhi kontribusi nasional bagi penanganan perubahan iklim atau NDC. Indonesia telah memutakhirkan NDC untuk meningkatkan ketahanan dan kapasitas adaptasi. Kedua, seluruh potensi masyarakat harus digerakkan. Indonesia melibatkan masyarakat untuk mengendalikan perubahan iklim melalui program Kampung Iklim yang mencakup 20.000 desa di tahun 2024. Ketiga, kemitraan global harus diperkuat. Indonesia memprioritaskan kerjasama peningkatan kapasitas dalam menghadapi perubahan iklim bagi sahabat kami di Pasifik. Tentunya, negara maju harus memenuhi komitmennya. Keempat, kita harus terus memajukan pembangunan hijau untuk dunia yang lebih baik. Yang mulia, KTT ini harus dapat melipat gandakan aksi iklim dunia melalui solidaritas, kolaborasi, dan kepemimpinan kolektif global, dan mengawal detail pelaksanaannya di masing-masing negara. Terima kasih.
Trái đất, ngôi nhà chung của chúng ta đang bị rung chuyển mạnh mẽ do những tác động nghiêm trọng của biến đổi khí hậu, sự phát triển, tồn vong của nhiều dân tộc, quốc gia bị đe dọa. Thách thức này chỉ đang nặng nề thêm bởi sự lan tràn của đại dịch COVID-19 đang gây ra những hệ lụy to lớn và làm phân tán nguồn lực dành cho các nỗ lực ứng phó với biến đổi khí hậu. Hội nghị hôm nay có ý nghĩa hết sức quan trọng khi chúng ta chung tay đoàn kết mở ra thập kỷ mới vì ngôi nhà trái đất thân yêu. Với những quyết tâm mạnh mẽ, các sáng kiến mới, tăng cường hành động thích ứng với biến đổi khí hậu, góp phần quan trọng thúc đẩy thực hiện mục tiêu phát triển bền vững SDG 2030 của Liên Hiệp Quốc. Theo Ngân hàng Thế giới, Việt Nam là một trong những quốc gia chịu ảnh hưởng nặng nề nhất bởi biến đổi khí hậu. Để thích ứng với biến đổi khí hậu, bên cạnh việc tích cực tái cấu trúc nền kinh tế theo hướng carbon thấp, giảm phát thải khí nhà kính, Việt Nam cam kết tăng cường sức chống chịu và nâng cao năng lực thích ứng của cộng đồng, các thành phần kinh tế và hệ sinh thái. Chính phủ Việt Nam coi dựa vào người dân, sự chung tay hợp tác, hành động của mỗi người dân là nền tảng cho triển khai thắng lợi các chương trình hoạt động thích ứng với biến đổi khí hậu. Mặc dù Việt Nam đã rất nỗ lực, nhưng tiềm lực nền kinh tế hiện mới đáp ứng được 30% nhu cầu thích ứng với biến đổi khí hậu của quốc gia. Trong giai đoạn 2021-2030 cần huy động thêm khoảng 35 tỷ đô la. Thưa quý vị đại biểu, các thách thức của biến đổi khí hậu sẽ tiếp tục gia tăng và trở nên khó kiểm soát. Chúng ta cần khẩn trương hành động và tăng cường khả năng thích ứng ngay từ bây giờ, Việt Nam sẽ tiếp tục tích cực tham gia vào các nỗ lực chung của cộng đồng quốc tế nhằm chuyển hóa những thách thức do biến đổi khí hậu thành cơ hội phát triển bền vững cho tất cả mọi người. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn.
Prime Minister Mark Rutte and fellow leaders, adaptation is of the highest importance to the Republic of the Marshall Islands and to small islands and large ocean states worldwide. Climate change has profoundly affected our islands and the ocean which we rely on. People's livelihood at the community level, the surrounding ecosystem, and our fundamental rights are severely threatened. Last month, the Marshall Islands became the first small island developing state to submit its national adaptation communication to the UNFCCC. To my government, it is essentially a national survival plan. People are at the center of this process. Developing this adaptation plan requires robust collaborations with all stakeholders. In particular, we are harmonizing traditional knowledge with the best available science to generate solutions based on our unique circumstances. As we approach COP26, greater attention to the importance of adaptation and the financial commitments required to deliver climate protection are vitally needed and urgent. This historic challenge is also an opportunity as we begin to rebuild from COVID-19. I wish to commend the Netherlands and the Global Center on Adaptation for convening this important summit, and we look forward to the outcome of the summit. Thank you so much, and komol tata.
Thank you all for your contributions. Minister van Nieuwenhuizen, well, what do you say if you hear all these world leaders talk about what they are contributing?
Well, I think it's one big message of hope, starting with Agnes Kalibata from AGRA. She's such an inspiring woman, bringing back all the African farmers, reunite them actually. And if we see Feike Siebersma, he's a front runner for the private sector. We need them on board so much. So he's doing great work there. And then South Korea, speaking about P4G, Indonesia, struggling, of course, with coastal erosion, flooding, same in Vietnam, coastal erosion, Marshall Islands, the problems with the rising sea level. The situation is different in every country, but what we have in common is that we need to adapt, and we need to adapt now.
We will. Our next speakers are President Paul Kagame from let's see, Paul Kagame from Rwanda, President Alberto Fernandez from Argentina, President Macky Sall from Senegal. Welcome to you all.
Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre Mark Rutte, pour l'organisation de ce sommet sur l'adaptation au climat. Pays côtier et sahélien, le Sénégal fait face à l'urgence climatique en agissant sur 3 principaux fronts. L'investissement massif dans la transition énergétique, ce qui porte à 34% la part des énergies propres dans nos capacités électriques installées à ce jour. La reforestation et la restauration de la biodiversité, avec 53 forêts aménagées et plus de 7 millions de plants mis en pépinière. Enfin, la lutte contre l'érosion côtière, dont l'un des derniers projets phares nous a permis récemment, en partenariat avec la Banque mondiale, de sauvegarder une importante zone côtière avec la restauration des plages et une zone qui a sauvé donc 17 hôtels et plusieurs autres activités liées au tourisme et à la pêche. Je remercie tous les partenaires qui soutiennent nos programmes d'adaptation au climat, comme les Pays-Bas. En complément des efforts nationaux, j'appelle à l'amélioration des mécanismes de financement bilatéraux et multilatéraux afin qu'ils soient plus accessibles, plus diligents et plus efficaces. Ensemble, restons mobilisés et solidaires dans l'adaptation au climat pour sauver la planète, notre habitat commun. Je vous remercie.
As we work to slow the pace of climate change, we must also work to mitigate its effects. Climate change, after all, is a fact which calls for social and economic resilience to protect livelihoods. I thank Prime Minister Mark Rutte and the Netherlands government for spearheading this initiative, which helps set the stage for COP26 later this year. In Rwanda, the changing climate is already making itself felt in unusually heavy rainfall and flooding. Changing weather patterns also affect agriculture. We are responding by investing in water resources management, for example, restoring catchment areas and wetlands. Last year, Rwanda established the Rwanda Water Resources Board to ensure integrated long-term planning around water, irrigation, and climate. The Netherlands government is a strong supporter of these efforts, particularly with new technology, and Rwanda Green Fund catalyzes financing for climate resilience projects and has already supported the creation of thousands of green jobs. To meet that goal, we are working to preserve forests through public-private partnerships for forest management, together with investment partners. Investment in climate adaptation strengthens our societies for future growth and prosperity. Let's make adaptation a priority for 2021 and beyond.
La adaptación es una prioridad en la política climática de la Argentina. Por eso mismo hemos decidido confirmar el compromiso que nuestro país mantiene con la agenda climática. Nuestra contribución incluye una comunicación de adaptación que busca fortalecer la resiliencia y disminuir la vulnerabilidad de los distintos sectores económicos, sociales y ambientales. Confiamos en que nuestro sistema científico, tecnológico, servirá como fuente de conocimientos y herramientas para abordar este desafío. Creemos también que esta tarea debe asumir un enfoque transversal que tenga en cuenta vulnerabilidades particulares e integre la dimensión de género a lo largo de los sectores. Como sabemos, la pandemia de COVID-19 nos ha desafiado en muchos aspectos. Sin embargo, la urgencia de la acción climática permanece intacta. Nos encontramos ante la oportunidad de actuar colectivamente para dar respuesta al cambio climático. Es necesario que exista un mayor compromiso por parte de los países desarrollados en la provisión de recursos técnicos y financieros para ampliar esos esfuerzos. Debemos actuar con solidaridad ante un problema que nos afecta a todos, pero cuyas peores consecuencias son sentidas por los sectores más vulnerables. La Argentina espera continuar trabajando conjuntamente en las negociaciones bajo la Convención Marco de las Naciones Unidas sobre el Cambio Climático, con miras a promover el éxito de la próxima conferencia de partes en el curso de este año.
Well, we have covered the entire world, from Latin America to Asia and from Africa to North America. The last 1.5 hours has given an insight in the urgency to adapt to climate change. It has taught us that countries and organizations face different challenges, but it has also given us hope. There's so much ambition, there's so much knowledge, expertise, and the willingness to adapt. Adaptation needs to be mainstreamed into different fields. And one of the places where all those fields come together is in our cities. And I'm joined here in the studio by Mayor Ahmed Abu Taleb, welcome, from the city of Rotterdam, the port of the Netherlands. Mr. Mayor, you met this morning with many of your colleagues. What was the outcome of this meeting?
I have the honor, together with the Dutch government, to host the Mayors Conference, part of this international conference. A couple of things. First, mayors are positive. They really are optimistic that they will realize change in the cities. Second, they face the challenge that big changes in the cities may be considered with a lot of uncertainty for the citizens.
Mm-hmm.
The citizens will say, well, why? And maybe they will resist change if we will not make clear that they will be joining us without facing a lot of troubles in the future when it comes to the incomes and social well-being. So there is a challenge. The other one is that collaboration is really important, knowledge. We are happy in the Netherlands and Rotterdam to have a lot of knowledge when it comes to water and water defending systems, etc. So sharing is really important. And the last one is cities and governments must work together. I'm lucky to work with the government, which is really collaborating with the cities and the regions when it comes to this major endeavor. That's not the case in all the cities in the world. And the last one is we face the problem of financing. These are costly programs, and not all the countries have the resources to do the work. So we need the interventions of the World Bank and the IMF. And the last thing is I have the honor to tell you that we launched a program aiming to make 1,000 cities in the world work together to realize this high ambition. And this is the document that I had the honor this morning to present to Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who is the chair of GCE. And Madam Minister, via you, I would like to ask you to virtually accept this program and to make it work on international level with the leaders of the world.
I will give it to her. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Abu Taleb. Well, the mayor forums will be broadcasted, I have to tell you, because you can watch it. It will be broadcasted on the platform of the summit later today, so you can see it. But today we also celebrate the sunsetting of the Global Commission on Adaptation. We are very grateful for the acceleration that this high-level commission has enabled on adaptation action. They have laid the groundwork for this summit and put adaptation on the political agenda. We have heard from its co-chairs Ban Ki-moon and from Kristalina Georgieva. Let's also hear from the third co-chair of the Commission, Mr. Bill Gates. He will tell us why adaptation is essential.
2021 will be a critical year for the future of the planet. We can put the world on a pathway to low-carbon, resilient growth, minimizing the damage that climate change causes to developing countries. Of course, there's a lot of focus on COVID-19 right now, and that makes sense. The pandemic has killed millions, hurt the global economy, and erased many years of progress in fighting poverty and hunger. And so we have a lot of work to do to help the world recover, get back to where we were, and get on a growth path. If we look at smallholder farmers, not only have they faced the economic hardships from COVID, they're also feeling the negative effects of climate change, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. And with the right tools, agriculture will be the most powerful engine for equitable green growth and incomes. The digital tools can get information to farmers about what to plant and when to plant. They can help them prepare for climate-related threats like a drought or disease infestation. The digital blueprint being launched by the Commission today is an important tool to accelerate digital adaptation and mitigation efforts. We have to find ways to end the poverty of information afflicting smallholder farmers. As the world leader in harnessing agricultural science for better lives, CGIAR is a critical part of this transformation. We've been facing one of the most difficult periods in modern history. COVID-19 has taught us some important lessons. It's reminded us that we have to invest in public goods and ensure equal access to new innovations. As we begin a new decade, we have an opportunity to take these lessons, raise our ambitions, and build a better world than the one we lived in before the pandemic. The leaders today have the power to shape a better future for our planet. Let's work together to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gates, for your contribution and your role in adaptation, of course. Minister van Nieuwenhuizen, you are, as we already said, the mastermind behind this summit. Could you tell us why it was so important to bring all these leaders together today?
Well, thank you, Sasha, and thank you for presenting all these inspiring contributions from all these world leaders. This is exactly the leadership that the world urgently needs to speed up the action on climate adaptation. The years between 2030 and now will be the make or break decade for our societies. So either we will pass a point of no return on climate, or we hold the line. Either we fall behind and sink into climate chaos, or we speed up our efforts to adapt and we keep up. So the good news is that adaptation and climate resilience are a great opportunity as well. An economic opportunity because of the benefits of smarter investments. It can help us avoid risks and make us resilient to the dangers ahead.
Well, this summit also brings forth a climate action agenda. What will be in that agenda?
Well, the Adaptation Action Agenda sets out new practical endeavors and partnerships. Partnerships have always been fundamental to the Dutch approach. And that's why we brought so many countries and organizations together here, and on a bigger scale than ever before. So we can face our common challenges and boost adaptation action together. We heard, for example, from Bangladeshi Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina speaking about water management alliances. We heard India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaking about disaster-resilient investment. South Korean President Moon Jae-in spoke about the global P4G network, and that was only a few. The Adaptation Action Agenda is actually a guide for joint adaptation efforts. And the bottom line is, it takes time to adapt, so we'd better hurry up.
We have to, indeed. What will happen next at this summit?
Well, the next 24 hours will be packed with 10 anchoring events and more than 100 side events hosted by partners from all over the world.
And do you have some last remarks for the world leaders?
Actually, yes. Dear friends, it's time for action. Let's all work together to make this decade our decade of transformation. I invite you to set off on this most critical journey and walk this path together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Minister van Nieuwenhuizen. And thank you, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who's already applauding. Thank you, Ban Ki-moon, for being here during this whole summit. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. It has been an honor to guide you through the opening session. Right before the high-level opening, a CAS talks took place. And these CAS talks will run through the entire summit as a common thread, linking the different events. And you can also watch the Accelerating African Adaptation event right after this opening session. Please stay tuned and stay connected. Thank you and goodbye.